Guys, let's get started again. All right. So, what exactly is plasma? Plasma is a great is a breakthrough by Vitalik and Joseph Poon, and it's a scaling solution among the many scaling solution that we have. But I think even compared to sharding and some of the other things they are doing, plasma is going to be big. Essentially, it boils down to these 8 steps. You have two chains, root chain, which would be, for example, Ethereum, and you would have another chain on top of it, and a deposit in the root creates a unspent output in the plasma chain, and a withdrawal removes it. And what happens is periodically the block headers of the plasma chain are stored into the root chain, which have sufficient information to prove that everything is correct. And if something is incorrect, these can be detected and proven using something called fraud proofs, which are essentially methods on the root chain. The cool thing about this is that if there is a maleficent operator and they withhold any blocks, people can exit the plasma block into the root block, and their funds are still safe. The idea is that you would only hit the root chain only on a deposit or a withdrawal, or when you create a new block. Otherwise, you wouldn't have any load on the root chain. This means you can scale to the size of a centralized exchange, for example, without having any load except during deposits and withdrawals, which you already do in any exchange. There are a few variants. Variant that Omisego is working on right now is called Plasma MVP, and also a few others. It is very straightforward. You simply, when you deposit something into the root chain, it creates a UTXO in the plasma chain, and there is a priority queue which enables you to withdraw by the age of the output. And you spend using signed transactions. The only burden is that the user has to regularly check the plasma chain, so not the root chain, the chain with a lot of which could have millions of transactions. And if they detect something is going wrong, they exit that plasma chain. What are some of the issues with this? The priority queue can get very large. Traders can have a lot of outputs, a lot of unspent outputs. A market maker can have millions of outputs. And what happens when you have a price time priority matching in an engine, the smaller outputs will shred the larger outputs and create many small outputs. So the users are incentivized to hold a lot of tiny outputs so that they can create orders of any size. And what this does is that it makes it a big burden on the root chain itself. The outputs are so many that it's not economical to exit them when something goes wrong. The users also have to check the plasma chain for every transaction. This is not a light burden. So imagine if you have Ether in some address, or you have Bitcoin in some address, and you have to check every week to see if it's still there, and or if you are at risk of someone stealing it, and then you have to take an action. And this is not a good user experience. You want to know that once you have something, it just stays there. The last problem is that if something is wrong, then everyone has to rush very quickly. And this is a problem because the blocks will get clogged, the fees will rise, no one may be able to exit. There's another variant that people are working on right now that reduces some of these issues, called Plasma Cache. And the key change here is that UTXOs are non-fungible. So you have outputs that are like, 0.1 ether, 0.01 ether, and different denominations. They cannot be merged into one. They cannot be split into multiple outputs. The advantage of this is that you only need to check the root chain to see if your particular output has been spent. Of course, the issue with this is there's no way to match orders with if you have a buy for 5 and I have a sell for 2, there's no way to match it because you cannot split the outputs. So this is simply not appropriate for a matching engine. So I'm just going to skip this. It still has other problems. The reason, I think, one of the things we did not like about the design of Plasma is that the incentives are not balanced properly. The person who wants to be safe has all the burden, and the other is that only a counterparty can prove that something has gone wrong. So if I send a transaction to you, only you know if the signature is valid. And there are other issues as well, but this is one of the things we realized is the biggest issue with the current Plasma. So we created a version of Plasma called Gluon Plasma, and what we did was we made it account based, and most of the issues with Plasma are because of the UTXO model, when it simply amplifies all the issues. So the moment you make it account based, there is no shredding anymore, which means also there is no bloats, and the fraud proofs are very compact. You don't need the entire history of the coin for anything. You just need to show the valid state and the invalid state, and there is sufficient information in those two to prove that something's gone wrong. The other thing we have done is we are enabling any user to halt and check and halt the chain. This means that as long as there's one honest person watching the chain, then your funds are safe. Also, we don't have mass exit. We have halting the chain. What this means is that if the Plasma chain is not behaving as expected, there is no point in continuing the Plasma chain. So if you can prove that the chain is behaving incorrectly, you can simply halt the chain and you can withdraw at leisure. So this makes it suitable for low latency trading. You don't have complex transactions to assemble, or you don't have any sort of issues with things that don't match in size and so on. So far, are there any questions?
There are no questions yet, but if you want to give like a few moments to see if anyone has any, then we can do that.
Yeah, let's give about 30 seconds because this is a good segue into things get a little more complicated after this. All right, let's move on. So these are the characteristics we want in something that can scale, and we also want it to be usable, not just scales. One of the most important thing in an exchange is finality. When you trade, when you have a match, this should not be possible to reverse it. So if there was proof of work or even proof of stake, it is possible that you don't have finality. It's always probabilistic finality. So you would have to wait for so many blocks before you can do anything with it. Which means that if you buy, and if you immediately see a profit, you should be able to sell. Or if you're in a position, you need to be able to hedge somewhere else. So without finality, it's just not possible. So we use proof of authority, and that gives us instant finality. In Plasma, there is a need to place bonds to do normal operations. So if you want to withdraw coins from the root chain, you have to place a bond. And we found it very odd to, that they have put money, different money, to uh, to withdraw their own coins. And we wanted to eliminate this in normal conditions. Only when something really goes wrong, and you need to prove that the operator is bad, you'd need a bond. The sizes of the bonds are also very nominal in when things go wrong. They are not huge bonds. They are enough to be an incentive to the checkers, but they are not huge that people cannot afford them, or it's a significant percentage of someone's account. What we have are fraud proofs for every state transition, which means that people can keep checking your state, and the first time a person's account goes from valid to invalid, there is always a proof that can prove that the operator or something else has gone wrong. The rules of the chain have been violated. Fraud proofs are fixed size. They are not variable size. They don't vary with the number of trades. They don't vary with how many blocks have passed. They don't vary with the size of your transaction. Everything is just fixed size. Withdrawal deal is a very short. In Plasma right now, it's 2 weeks. In the Plasma MVP and Classic, this is simply not practical for an exchange. If you have to wait 2 weeks to withdraw, first of all, it's just unusable. But you would not find a market maker when the prices are moving rapidly. Market maker needs to hedge. They need to keep moving money into or out of the chain, and 2 weeks is just no one is going to trade on such an exchange. So we wanted to bring it under 2 hours. We have managed to bring it. I think we may be able to do it under 1 hour. Very soon. And non-onerous safety means is the same thing, just like in Bitcoin or Ethereum. As long as 51% of the miners are honest, you're fine. What we have is, as long as there's a single honest validator, you just need one of them to be honest, your coins are safe. We didn't want a lot of storage burden. We didn't want something that would hit the chain every time there's a trade, or every few seconds, because all of this will simply cause bloat, and when there is congestion on the network, you won't be able to trade. The exchange won't be able to trade. So it is, you may have seen this even in some other exchanges. Prices are moving. It looks like it's a great place to enter or exit. You try to place a trade and just nothing happens. It just won't accept your order because it's over capacity. And the last is the free option problem. So we didn't. So in Plasma, if you want to create a transaction, I want to buy and you want to sell, we have to create a transaction. I have to sign the transaction, send it to you, and you have to sign it, and then publish it. Now, what happens is, if someone receives a transaction to sign, a signed transaction that you have to countersign, you can simply look at the market and see if it's going your way. And if it's going your way, you sign it. If it's going against you, you don't sign it. That's called the free option problem. And if this exists, this is not attractive for anyone to trade at all. Why would I enter into a trade? Why would I sign anything first if I know that I'm at a disadvantage? You will never sign it unless it moves in your favor, which means the only so this means the person who signs first, every trade that he's going to get into is going to be a losing trade, at least initially. So that would also be completely impractical from a trading perspective. So we wanted to remove that situation as well. And we did all of these by balancing incentives. The first thing we did was, in the protocol, any actor who has incentive to cheat is the one who has to post a bond. And anyone can prove fraud and claim a bounty. And if the operator tries to create a griefing attack, which means he just doesn't act when he needs to, then there is a mitigating exit for the grieved party. And this is not the full protocol, but I just wanted to show you how we illustrate the balance of incentives. The red indicates an actor who has incentive to cheat, and when there is incentive to cheat, there needs to be a light green on the right column. So anyone should be able to challenge it. The yellow is someone who has no incentive to cheat, so it doesn't matter. The orange is the operator who has the incentive. It doesn't have an incentive, but he may just decide to just not act, withhold action or something like that. And when that happens, there needs to be a dark green for the actor to exit that path. And this is how we make sure that every part of the protocol has incentives balanced this way, and that way um, the the system is a lot more stable and usable. One of the things that we wanted is provable security. This proof is still pending, but there is a variant of this proof in our previous paper, which is the leverage protocol paper. And we believe that in any system, if you follow these 4 constraints, then the user's funds are safe. If you can provably follow these 4 constraints. Segregation is simply that you can only deposit and withdraw into addresses for which you control a private key. So, I can only deposit into my account. I cannot deposit into yours, and I can only withdraw into my account. I cannot withdraw into yours. And this also, for example, makes the exchange not a money transmitter, so it doesn't require a lot of the KYC, AML. It doesn't require those paperwork. Solvency means that you can only uh, withdraw amount that is uncommitted to any trade. So if you have 5 ether and 2 ethers are committed to some orders, then you can only withdraw 3 ether. Right? So you will never go into negative balance essentially. Agency is that any move of any funds requires a signature of all parties, including the operator. So you have, and this is part of the provability, that someone has authorized a move from their account. Last is integrity. Everything needs to add up, and this ensures that the operator simply doesn't create something out of thin air, right? So if I am buying 3, it needs to, the pre and post state should add up. So we go back to Plasma MVP and show how they have designed their UTXO model, and we will see how we derive our system from it. It's fairly simple. You have you have 2 inputs and 2 outputs, and for our there are per user per transaction. So in our example here, there is a user 1 and user 2. User 1 has ether and wants to buy lev. The user 2 has lev and wants to sell it for ether. And what would happen is you would get, it would, the user 1 would get a new UTXO for leverage, and the user 2 would get a new UTXO for ETH, essentially. If someone doesn't have an output, it's just left 0, as you can see the third row on the left side. That's essentially it. So you have only 4, and it's fixed size. So you cannot put hundreds of inputs, and you cannot have hundreds of outputs. It's not like a Bitcoin transaction. This is just fixed size. The issue with this is that there are some issues with this. One of them is shredding. As you can see, there was an order for 2,000 orders, so this split into size 2 UTXO. But people can sell 1 lev, and what this would do is it would split. If your order if this is matched in a single buy and sell, but in reality, one of your orders will match against, and if you have a big order, it will match against hundreds of counter orders, and that means you'll get hundreds of outputs. So outputs to thousands of outputs. A market maker who is pretty much participating in every trade will have hundreds of thousands of outputs in a very short time.
Hey, Bharath, we have a question from JMT. Is this commonly accepted legal practice now that the segregation of accounts means the exchange is not a money transmitter?
So this is, as far as I know, there's been no legal test in the sense there is been no staff letter by a regulatory agency. We plan to contact regulatory agencies in some countries, some prominent economies, and we believe that we will be able to get a staff letter asking us not to do it. So currently the regulation is not completely clear. The way they've written it is that an exchange administrator is a money transmitter. This is in the United States. But in many other places, money transmission is fairly straightforward. It's defined very clearly. Anyone who takes funds from person A and transmits it to person B is a money transmitter. But if you cannot transmit it to person B, then you cannot be a money transmitter. It's just a service. So yeah, this we will wait for some legal tests, but we believe that this is going to be the future, where if you can create financial systems like this, it eliminates the need for money laundering. We have a mathematical proof that shows that this is not attractive or not usable for money laundering, this sort of scheme. So this is way more efficient than KYC. Any more questions? All right, let's proceed. So one of the issues with order matching on Plasma is something called a knapsack problem. And the idea is that you have to find all the right amount, the optimal amount of outputs to spend to create a transaction that exactly fits into or fits close to the amount that you want to match. And this is an intractable problem. It's NP complete. So if you have a lot of small outputs of varying sizes, and you want to buy a certain amount, optimally putting them into one transaction and optimally creating n transactions out of it to represent your order is not a trivial problem. And once you do that, the coordination of you signing one side of it, sending it to the other party, getting signed by them, is also a non-trivial problem. It's just there's a lot of latency, so it is simply not practical for an exchange. So in Gluon, what we do is we have only one output per asset per user, and whenever there's a trade, that output is spent and a new one is created. In this example, the user has 7. So if you remember in the previous, the user had 3 and 4 of ether. In our example, he just has 1, and it's just 7. And they, after the trade, they only have 1 of each. So what this does is it simply creates everything. Everything can now be labeled. Every output of an asset type can be labeled with the asset type, as you can see on the right side there. And that can represent a person's account, and you can refer it in other places, and it allows you to create an account model. So every output is actually a state, and every at any point in time, your outputs represent a state, and they change to the next state after a trade. And since each of these things are signed by the users, and you can see that all of these things need to add up, you have fraud proofs. As you can see on the right, User had 7 ether, he spent 5 ether, he should have 2 ether left. This is very simple to check. Same thing with the lev that he bought. He had 0, and now he bought 2,000, so he should have 2,000. And this is just a small sample. There's this, I think, about 15 to 20 fraud proofs that can be checked. They're small enough that they can be checked very fast, and the proofs are they're constant time to check, and most of them are pretty easy. Constant time to check. The fraud proofs are small, so it's very easy for a checker to check all of them, even in a high volume exchange. So this is the last piece. There is only one problem that is you cannot do with fraud proofs is when you don't have data to prove anything. So if the operator simply withholds blocks, then there is really nothing else anyone can do except exiting the chain. What the thing we do differently from other Plasma implementations is we believe that if the operator is compromised, there is no point in continuing the chain. So we halt the chain. And we do this by voting on chain, and the voting is weighted by stake size. And what that means is someone who is holding 50% of the of the assets on the root chain, if that person's vote is 50% of the total vote, it's not per person, it's per money at stake. And when you vote, you actually delay the next block. What this means is, let's say you have a market maker who has a lot of money, and you have like 2 or 3 of them. They have incentive to check the chain, and the moment they notice something is going wrong, they will simply vote to halt the chain. And even if it doesn't cross the threshold to halt the chain, it will push the next block by sufficient time. So let's say a couple of weeks, which will give everyone else the chance to vote and halt the chain. And until then, they can still withdraw their funds. So it gives you time to withdraw your money, and it also gives you time to halt the chain. And so this eliminates the urgency and all of the other issues of managing the exit. So that is essentially what I have. Do you guys have any questions so far?
I think what we'll do is we'll give it like a minute for everyone to digest the whole slide group and ask any questions if they have any, and then I'll pass on to Shashank, who has lots of cool stuff to show. So yeah, 1 to 2 minutes to ask any questions if you have any. We have a question from CryptoPig. Says, do you think Gluon Plasma will become the standard Plasma implementation that other projects will use rather than the other variants, or is it tailored to the specific use cases of Leverage?
So I think Gluon Plasma will be this. It could be the standard for anything that's an exchange. It is not necessarily good for everything. So UTXO model works pretty good for coins. So if you want to create a high volume coin, you could still create it on a Plasma block, but you would still on like a Plasma MVP, but you would still need to exchange through a centralized exchange. And the Plasma space is evolving pretty rapidly, and in a couple of months there could be something else that is better than this. But I do believe that Gluon Plasma is the first Plasma that meets all the requirements of a high-speed exchange. It's with the proper amount of UX. So yeah, it's a good chance we have shared this with like Gnosis, for example, and they seem to like it. They're doing something else. They're doing a block trading. But yeah, we hope that this will be the standard.
Thanks for that question, CryptoPig. And if we don't have any more right now, I'll pass you over to Shashank.
Okay.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Another edition of the webinar, exciting updates. So, jump right in. Um, so, first things first, um, a lot of you have been asking questions about the launch, about when are we going live, um, when will you get hands-on the leverage trading platform, and that is exciting news for us because we are excited and we want our users to start using our platform. So that's something that is uh, driving us as a development team and getting us all sort of teed up towards good things to come, right? Now the question though is that given that this is a financial exchange, an exchange where you're going to transact with your assets, we want to make sure that we focus on robustness, we want to focus on security, we want to focus on scale. So those are very fundamental to us. At the end of the day, a lot of exchanges in the past, over the last couple of years and more, have had a ton of trouble in just trying to rush out of the gate, launch a product, and then run into all kinds of big issues, right? Especially security issues where people have lost a lot of money. Now, as a decentralized exchange, as an exchange which we want to make sure is fraud proof, applies all the sort of tenets of a fast and sort of a liquid exchange, but at the same time is very reliable. It's super important for us to make sure that we test it well, to make sure that we um, work through a process where we have a product which is in the hands of some experts or some initial users and goes through an iterative model before its general availability, before it's there for everyone. Okay, so that's the kind of underlying philosophy. I wanted to state that out so that you sort of follow me along and understand why we are proposing what we are proposing. So at the moment, the way things are looking, and again, like I said, super good progress here. We are looking towards an initial launch in May, as we had mentioned. Now, what does that initial launch mean? Is this a launch that all of you are going to get your hands on? Is it a more limited launch? Well, it is what we call the beta on testnet launch. So the idea of this launch is that we'll have a focus group, and I'm going to talk about the beta testing group and the beta testing process in a short bit. But we'll essentially have a beta testing, a focus group. And the focused group is going to work feature by feature, flow by flow, and start getting hold of the product. They will start playing with the product, they will start transacting on the product, and they, in some sense, will help us provide that more advanced, higher level of UAT and a higher level of thorough testing, which would be absolutely necessary for us to go mainstream. Right? So that's what we're going to start out with. It's going to be an iterative process, and from there we'll graduate on to our mainnet. So once we've had enough amount of testing on the testnet with the same beta product and the sort of same focus group, and of course when I say same focus groups, I do expect that some members will get added on as we keep moving forward, and some members may choose to focus on some other things, and we go on to mainnet. And once we've gone through that same iterative process on the mainnet, the next logical step will be an early access program. Now, there can be enough confusion, I know, in the development world and the product launch world of what is the difference between a beta and early access program. And really, in our context, what it applies is the beta is more of a focus group, more from a feature, more from a development-centric standpoint. The early access would take a slightly notch up where we are on the mainnet by then, and we start looking at perhaps a market maker or two, perhaps some little bit of volume, just so that we kind of seed it. We get started in a way where we make sure we can manage the scale that we are built for. We are true to our fraud-proof tenets, and we are able to, essentially sort of be robust on multiple counts, right? And from there on, of course, general availability, which is everyone comes and trades. Now, do remember that this timeline that I'm putting out there starts out with spot trading. Now, that is something also that many of you have been asking on the Telegram channels in the previous webinars. And as we've mentioned in the previous webinars too, the approach we have taken is we want to start out with spot, and spot seems like the right place for multiple reasons. One, because of the complexity, right? We want to make sure that we can manage robustness, scale, security for spot. And secondly, it's also the one that most people engage in. So I think once you get a hang of a good decentralized exchange on spot, it's easy to graduate on to the next level, which is basically derivatives, right? So in our case, I think the futures part of the story is going to come in at a later point in time. Now, I know that the dates haven't been finalized, but it's certainly a few months out. It is not going to be anytime in a hurry. We don't intend to just throw out features and then sort of scramble with it. What we want to hold ourselves true to is a good, solid, robust product, which is here for the long term, which you all can rely on, and you can use it with your peace of mind, right? So as we go through our spot process, the spot trading part of the story, we'll soon then graduate on to our sort of the futures trading from there on, and then of course we'll keep evolving from there. So that's the sort of journey to launch. Now, starting out in May, the first part of the story, as I said, is really the beta on testnet. So the beta on testnet, if you think about what does it include, like what are the various parts to beta on testnet? So the beta on testnet, the first thing is around it being continuous and iterative, as I'd mentioned. So what does that mean? What it really means is that we are not going to wait for the whole product to be baked. We are not going to be waiting for every single bell and whistle to be implemented, and then we'll start testing. That's a model that's anyway old school. For a lot of us who are in the sort of depths and trenches of engineering, that is not something we do in today's time and age. So what we're going to follow is a more feature by feature, flow by flow approach. Things that get ready, we'll ship it out, we'll call it out to a focus group, we'll let them know, what is ready for testing, what is ready for, sort of going through various scenarios, and then we start testing against that. There'll be builds often. We certainly today have a CI/CD process, and internally we do end up building that out often. We'll see what cadence makes sense for this beta testing group, but certainly it'll be frequent enough. Now, from a process standpoint, this is something that, of course, Vilo and Joe, who are our, community leaders, and then, Swap, who's been bringing a lot of product ideas, will lead. We'll start with a sort of a registration and enrollment process. What I mean by that is anyone who's interested, anyone who understands the space, anyone who wants to contribute into making an awesome decentralized exchange is welcome. But obviously, we want to corral and make sure there is some, sort of overall sanity in our process. So what we are saying is we will form folks who are interested, folks who want to spend time into groups. And the registration and enrollment essentially will involve that, just so that you understand, what you're signing up for. We want to know how much time you can contribute. And then we'll put that together and make sure that you are sort of officially, if you may, part of the process. Now, as a part of just, the process that we are all on the same page and we are teeing up towards a goal, we'll have the usual tools in place. We'll have a weekly sync, which our product and community managers will run. From R&D side, you will see Nirmal and Benny and I also jump in often on that call, so that we hear directly from users on how the system is being perceived. We will go through the usual process of recording every request that comes in, whether it's a bug or a feature request, and then of course we'll triage it internally to make sure that it's in line with the overall release goals. And then last but not the least, this is not going to be some private group where it'll all be hush hush and secretive, but our intention is that while the focus group will work more exhaustively with us, we are going to share very often, perhaps once a week, maybe more frequently, maybe less, depending on how much content we have out there with the community. So as a part of the community, even if you're not part of the leveraged focus group of beta testers, you would still get to know. You would have a good sense of what's going on, how do the features look, and again, if at any point in time, if you want to jump in and say, hey, I want to start using the product, I really want to get in, there will be avenues and channels for you to participate. So that's the sort of idea around the process. Now, what are we going to cover? Well, it's the entire process. So it is going to be the exchange product, the product that will finally be generally available. And there are various aspects to it. So, certainly there's a smart contracts aspect to it. There is the exchange and the matching engine aspect to it. And then there are, of course, the interfaces, right? Both the web and the mobile. And in fact, I'm going to share about some of the exciting mobile interfaces in a short bit too. What we'll do is, as I said earlier, feature by feature, flow by flow. Of course, the emphasis would vary. Sometimes the features, and they'll be all integrated, but sometimes it'll be more about interfaces testing and making sure the usability and user experience is great. And some other times it will be more about, perhaps some exchange mechanics or, the smart contract and its fidelity. So we'll go through each of those. And we'll go one by one through that. Okay. All right. So with that said, let me jump into the next bit, which is around our interfaces. So
One second, Shashank. We've got a question, well, two questions, but they're very similar. So we got Bill McLean and Thomas S in Telegram saying, I understand that everything must be secure and done right, but how did they have goals before, such as spot trading going live in January to now being sometime in May?
I think I can take that. It's fairly straightforward. So we did have a paper on how we would build it, and that would require an on-chain update for every trade that was filled, not for every order, but and not for every. So everything that eventually got filled would hit the chain, and if we built it that way, we could have it out by now. But we would be no different from in terms of the ability to scale and the user experience. We would be sort of like IDEX, right? They have a certain similar model. We have been working on Plasma for a while, and we realized that if we have the capability to build the exchange directly on Plasma, we don't have to have two separate implementations. Do the on-chain one now and then do the Plasma later. So we decided to just do the Plasma directly. And I think that although it pushed out the dates a little bit, in the long run, I think it actually saves time not to have two separate versions as far as the contracts are concerned. Because the moment you have something, you have things on the Ethereum chain, moving people out of it, getting people to move their money out, and moving it into somewhere else, this becomes a whole transition process. This also, so a lot of extra work would be created just by having two different implementations. So we decided to go with Plasma, and we were close enough that we could not announce it, but it was progressing at a rapid pace. Once we were sure that this works and it's we tested it out, we decided to announce it. We decided to share our findings with people who are in the ETH community. And once we got good feedback, we decided to go with this. So it was a strategic decision for more rapid overall long-term value to the users of the platform than to just say, we have a timeline. Let's push something out anyway, and it wouldn't actually it wouldn't make sense in terms of it wouldn't differentiate. You would have something that looks that performs at a similar level as anything else. And at that time, if you remember, with the CryptoKitties and everything, the network was so clogged, and even now it can get clogged with fees going up. It becomes actually pretty cumbersome. So we just wanted something that if it was the moment we realized we have the possibility of only touching the chain for deposits and withdrawals and an occasional block, we had to make the decision. So that is essentially the reasoning.
Thanks for that, Bharath, and thank you, Bill and Thomas, for those questions. I'll pass you back to Shashank.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, as Bharath already mentioned, well, at the end of the day, we'll have an exciting spot product soon, and then of course segue on to more exciting things in future. So moving on to more of the mobile interfaces, right? Where we are with our interfaces, what have we been cooking? These are also things that people have asked on the Telegram channels, where people want to know, will this work seamlessly? Is it going to be an app? Is it going to be, web and mobile? So we'll show you some stuff right now. So what we did right from the beginning was to make sure that a couple of things were absolutely taken care of. First of which was the ability to use the product across different interfaces. So we want to make sure whether you're on your desktop, whether you're on your a tablet like an iPad, or whether you're on any of the phones, any of the modern smartphones, you should be able to use it seamlessly. So that was kind of the underlying idea for us. What we wanted to do though was not just stick on or slap on the same UI across all the different bits, because then while it might work well, let's say on a desktop, it might have a very clunky experience on mobile. So we wanted to make sure it was responsive. It was different for different interfaces, and worked well for that particular context, for that particular form factor. And then last but not the least, I know this is a trivial one for some, but very important for the others. The emphasis was to make sure that in terms of the overall themes or schemes, we did have both the light and the dark themes in place. I know some people like the whole sort of dark theme, it's soothing to the eye, and then the others who like the more, bright look and feel, if you may. So if you see now on the screen, we are just showing you like a glimpse of the phone, different phone renderings, if you may. And what we're doing here on the phone renderings is that we've taken parts of the screen, and here my idea is just to show you a glimpse. Now, of course, as I mentioned, beta testing is going to start soon, and you'll actually get hold of this product, play with it and tell us a lot more. But I would even encourage feedback now, as I walk through this and I share bits and pieces of this. If you look at things and either you love some part of it, or you would see it to be different, or you feel that it is not absolutely friendly for a trader, voice your opinion. We love to hear from you. That's why we are sharing. So if you look at these, sort of the 4 different renderings here on the screen, going from sort of left to right, the very first one shows essentially what is very common in the trading community, the chart view, right? So if you're a regular trader, a crypto or otherwise, you perhaps live and breathe by the chart, right? So that's a tool that you're familiar with. What we wanted to make sure is that the chart view, a robust chart view, is available on the mobile phone as well, right? Now, rendering a chart view along with the ability to trade smoothly and also search for instruments and look at other elements like price and the order book can get tricky. So we have used the idea of tabs where we do keep some information which is relevant for you to trade in front of you all the time. So for example, your ability to buy or sell a certain instrument remains across screens. You would be able to do that across screens. So as you see the first 2 on the left, you have a chart view and then you have an order book view. But in both these views, you have the ability to trade. You have those, the essential data points, if you may, the price amount, the type of order, and of course the instrument details available right in front of you. So that way we feel like the usability on the phone would be far better, right? You have limited real estate and you want to make sure you have the same smooth experience. Now the middle content, of course, changes, right? So within the chart view, you have a couple of charts available, the price chart and the depth chart. And then in the order book view, you would be obviously be able to see the depth of the order book, but at the same time, you can also see the recent trades, both of which being important indicators for traders. Now, if you go all the way far right, what we also are showing are some of the other things that will be available on the phone. For example, you'll be able to see your balances across your different tokens. Now, this is of course not by any means indicative of what is going to get listed on our exchange. So I want to be very clear of that. These are just some sample testing data that we have put up there. But as we start adding instruments one by one, right, very carefully, making sure that those are the instruments that we want to support and list on our exchange. And if you have any of those assets and you trade against those, you'll be able to see balances of those in the fund section. So that's what it's showing, that you would be able to see your own balances very quickly just by a single click. And then, of course, as I mentioned, these themes are both in dark as well as light. So you would be able to quickly swap with just the, sort of the burger on the right, top right, between either of the views. You could either go to the light one or the dark one. And then, of course, you could flip across those depending on the time of the day. Sometimes, for example, later in the night when the light is more ambient, or rather more not very right in your face and bright, the light view is better, right? And sometimes the darker ones are. So with that said, let me also show one more small glimpse of the iPad or the tablet view, which is similar in spirit, but slightly different because we have more real estate there. And then I would love to see if there is more feedback or any sort of reaction to these screens. So here it's the same view, it's the same charts and order book, and then of course your own transactions, which is available, again in a tabbed format as we have on the mobile phone. The slight difference is because we have more real estate, we don't need to keep the two sides of the trade sort of as different tabs, or one hidden or one available at a time. So here we can show both, right? So we essentially have the buy and the sell sort of right next to each other, but the rest of the content is very similar. There are the two types of charts, and there's of course the standard data with the instruments. And then last but not the least, if you look at the last screen here on the right, which just shows your manage orders, which essentially is giving you the ability to see all your open orders and of course take some action on it. You could cancel orders, you could look at details of the orders, and so on and so forth. So those are the screens. Now, for the group that is going to get involved, or the sets of people who are going to sign up to be beta testers, many of you have already shown interest. Very soon in May, which we'll announce the exact dates, and we'll meet and we'll get into the weekly sync. You'll get your hand on this. You would start playing with this. Okay, so that's the part from at least the engineering update this morning. If there are any questions, happy to answer those.
We have a question on YouTube from Niels saying, I don't quite understand the role of Lev token in the project. Can you briefly give some context? Bharath, do you want to answer that, or Shashank?
Yeah, I'll let Bharath.
Yeah, I can answer that. So Lev tokens represent your access to the network and for your ability to trade on the platform. And the way the fee tokens are essentially an accounting mechanism to ensure that you can trade. You have the access up to the amount that you have covered by the amount of Lev tokens. So in other words, if you have if you are a trader who trades a certain volume of trades, you would require a certain amount of Lev tokens. And we realize that traders do not trade the flat amount all the time. As your trading needs increase, you may need to temporarily add more capacity, or if you're trading less for whatever reason, you may need to reduce the capacity. And that's what fee token does. It lets you stake the tokens that you want to use, and it generates fee tokens. Staking generates fee tokens depending on the volume, and it distributes the fee tokens that enable you to cover the trades. And for whatever reason, if you are using more than the Lev you have, you can buy fee tokens off the market, or if you're using less, you can sell those fee tokens. That enables you not to get into not to have to buy or sell Lev as your needs changes. So you can just have a fixed amount and look at it as a long-term access to the platform, and fee token as a short-term variation. And that is the technical explanation of how Lev and fee work in terms of the trading flow. But the purpose of Lev and fee is that they actually stabilize the economics of the platform. So because we accept fee token in lieu of trading fees, it creates it stabilizes everything. It stabilizes the price of the fee token. It's just the market will just work that way. It's simply demand and supply, and there is it makes sure that there are no unexpected price spikes, and the people who buy Lev are the people who who want access to the platform. So that's essentially the role. Our white paper has a big section on the economics of the platform, and our economist is not here today, but when he's back, say next update, we can talk a little more on this topic.
Thank you for the question, Niels. I just want to say that if any of you are interested in helping out with the LEVERJ beta, please reach out to either me, that's Joe, or Vilo on the Telegram. I'll pass you now to Jerry, who has a brief marketing update.
Hey, everybody. Lots going on in marketing we can't share quite yet, but just wanted to highlight a few items this week. Joe, our social media specialist, has been successful increasing our engagement up on Twitter. We've seen a nice jump in profile visits, mentions, and followers over this past month. Slide. We've recently transitioned from GoToMeeting to YouTube Live for webinar broadcasts. This, along with a consistent schedule of webinars, has increased our participation around 28% over this past month. Beginning this last quarter, we started exploring Steemit. I think Steemit is a good spot for leverage, crypto-centric site, similar to Reddit in that they have good focused channels. And Joe has started off by posting our trader dictionary and videos on DTube, and we'll look to engage the community there for sure as we move forward. And this past week, Bharath was on a panel at the Distributed Markets Conference in Chicago, which was hosted by BTC Media. Really good turnout, good conference for us. It was focused on trading and tech. Bharath was also interviewed for 2 podcasts this week on the Tatiana Show, and the other was on Crypto Disruptor. And we'll share those links to the podcast as soon as they become available. We have a lot of other things going on, and we'll share them as we get nearer to launch.
Thanks for the update, Jerry. Now I'd like to open up to any general questions about today's webinar or just in general product questions. We'll give you guys a couple of minutes to ask those, and if we don't have any, we'll end that here and see you in 2 weeks. So yeah, any questions, go ahead and ask those either in the Telegram or in the YouTube channel. Thanks. Looks like we have a question from CryptoPig. Is there any plan timeline to launch the prediction markets on LEVERJ?
That's a great question. So we've been working on something called LEVERJ. I don't know how you guys know about it, but maybe you followed it on ETH Research. So we have a very simplified way of creating a low-cost prediction market, and it will feed nicely into LEVERJ itself, because what we do is we create tokens from the from a particular prediction issue or prediction bet, and these tokens can be traded on really any token exchange. The big issues here are I think legal. There are not a lot of technical issues. We will create some sort of prototype code and put it out there, and maybe initially open it only to a few markets where it's easy, where there is no gambling license needed, or it's easy to get a gambling license. The contracts will be open source, so anyone can create a market and start trading them. But to actually trade on LEVERJ, I think there's some regulatory work that needs to be completed first.
Thank you for that question, CryptoPig. 1 more minute for any questions, and we will end that here. All right, guys, thanks to all of you who have stuck throughout the whole hour and 7 minutes of this webinar. I really appreciate that. Please do be in our Telegram. The link to that is in the biography of this stream if you're not there already. Don't forget, if you're interested in the Leverage beta, to message us on Telegram. And if you found anything exciting or interesting about today's webinar, please do tell your friends. We'd appreciate that a lot. And look out for some updates throughout our social channels. Thank you, guys. And thanks, Bharath, Jerry, and Shashank for their time today. And look forward to see you guys in 2 weeks for the next webinar. Thanks, guys.